Okay, so today we are talking to Alexandra Graziano from Graziano Family of Wines. Welcome, Alexandria. How are you today?
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And let's just start with you, if you don't mind, giving us a little bit of history about Graziano and your family and the wine business and how all that got started before we jump into the rest of the interview.
Of course. My Italian side of the family immigrated in about 1915 or so, and my great grandfather slowly made it across the U.S. and made it to Mendocino County and went, "Wow, this looks exactly like Piemonte, Italy, and this is where I'm going to settle down and plant a vineyard and have a family." And so my great grandfather started, and then my grandfather followed in his footsteps, and then as did my father in his. And then my father started our family winery in 1988 after working for several different wineries like La Crema and Martin Ray. And then he never pressured me into winemaking, and I just kind of came into it by being around and realizing how much I loved it. And then so I went to UC Davis and graduated out of their winemaking program and came here to work permanently.
So you grew up around all this, I mean, from the time you were born, pretty much. You said he didn't pressure you, but did you kind of always know you were going to do this, or was it something you gradually moved into?
I really thought about doing a couple other things. Like I thought about being a vet for a while when I was younger, and maybe doing something with pharmacy or being a doctor, but I love wine and nature and food and just the whole situation. I love people. You get to meet so many amazing people in this industry, and it's just kind of the puzzle pieces just kind of all fit. And I went, I would be stupid not to do this. And I knew it was going to be a lot of work because this is a really hard business to be in, but I went, I'm gonna do it anyway.
So tell me about when you were a kid coming up, what sort of things did you have to do in the winery that sort of built all of this up for you?
Well, I feel like my dad almost did everything to deter me from it at first, because I started working during the summers when I was in high school. So I think I was 13 when I would come and help out. My dad kind of pushed me in front of the cellar crew and said, "This is Alexandra. She's my oldest daughter. Whatever you don't want to do, make her do it. Teach her how to do it." So cleaning tanks, cleaning floors, I mean, shipping, whatever people just didn't want to do, I did it. Working out in the vineyard, I learned a lot of lessons on screen and appropriate attire while working out in the vineyard, that's for sure. But just being around all these great people, and all the people that have worked for us kind of were my babysitters. Even when I was really little, I was always at the winery, and just all the life lessons and all the stuff to make your life easier in the winery and in the vineyards. It was just, yeah, it just kind of, we've always been like a family here, and I really appreciated that. And I was like, I want to continue this kind of family business dynamic.
So being that Graziano is a family business, what do you think makes the wine you craft different or better, or does it because of that?
I think because we are, independently owned and operated, we get to make decisions that we really want to, that we want to make. We don't have to ask anybody to do anything. So when we want to make really weird varieties like Coda de Volpe or Falangina, we don't have to ask if that's okay or if it's in our marketing plan. We'll have some specific reason, like, oh, I love this grape variety, this random thing from Italy, let's plant it, let's do it. And we don't have to ask permission. And same with cost too. I mean, we don't use any weird oak alternatives in our wine. All of our wines, except for our Moscato, are aged in barrel. All of our white wines are barrel fermented. And it's like a costly thing. And I know a lot of people are trying to get away from that, especially big, big companies. And when your prices are as low as ours, it kind of would it turns heads sometimes. So even though we just do things because we're passionate about them, not because necessarily it like makes a lot of sense, monetarily, because we could use all these weird oak adjuncts and whatnot, but that's not the way we think you should do it. So,
Sounds about right. So, do you have a particular philosophy or a vision for the wines going forward for Graziano, or?
I want to continue on the kind of weird varietal path and making wines that are really good for great value and things that are kind of true to what they should be. But the one thing I kind of want to continue moving forward with is getting a little more like sustainable in our vineyards. And I mean, we're really good stewards to the land, but I'd like to kind of formalize it a little bit more because I think that's really important. So, and same with being conscious about water usage. That's a big issue right now, of course, in California, especially here in Mendocino. We're about to go into like a major drought. So just kind of making sure that we're being as green as possible. That's going to be, I think, a big thing moving forward for us.
Okay. Were you guys affected by the fires at all?
Um, I, which year? um, every year there's always something. This last fire we had really wasn't that bad for us. The only thing we didn't pick was our Pinot Meunier, because Pinots are really sensitive to smoke taint, and that one had really high numbers. But everything else we made was totally fine this year. And I think the distance between the fire and us, I was reading something about how, as long as you're not really directly around the fire, like even if you do have a lot of smoke in the air, if you're far enough away, the compounds don't really settle as hard into the skins. So, but it's going to be an ongoing problem that we really need to consider. So,
Okay. So I know this might be an odd question, but tell me a little bit about your creative process as a winemaker. What do you think about when you go into creating, something new, or a little bit of a twist on something else?
well, I always start with history. My dad is a walking encyclopedia. I'll find out something that's new to me and I'll go, oh, hey, Dad, they're, growing all this Nebbiolo in Mexico? And he's like, oh, yeah, it's this winery and this winery. I'm like, how'd you know that? It's such like a random thing to know. And so he's been really good about feeding me good wine book, making sure we know our history and, historically what these varieties were for, what they did, if they were workhorses or noble varieties. And if it's something we've never worked with before, we'll go in like an Italian variety. We'll buy a bunch of different wines from different varieties, get to know the history, what the variety's like, and then make our kind of California decisions on it. So, our wines are not as earthy and kind of esoteric as some Italian ones. So we try to add a nice California flair where it's a little more fruit forward, but still really serious and complex wines. So that's how I think about it. Like what is this really? And then how do we take it and make it to like what we really like and what we really want?
And I think I might be remiss if I didn't talk to you, especially with Women's Health Month just being over, about being a woman and being a winemaker. Is there a difference for you, or do you think it's just I'm not able to think of what
Well,
I would say here, but
I'll never forget. I was in a wine shop when I was probably 17 years old, and I had made the decision to be a winemaker quite a few years earlier, but I was just starting to travel. And we were in a wine shop with this older gentleman, and my father excused himself to use the restroom. And so I'm talking to him and I'm telling him that I, want to follow in the family's footsteps. And he basically came down on me saying that because I was a woman, I was never going to make it that far. And that I was dreaming if I was ever going to be respected. And then as soon as my father came back, his like tone changed. And if it's not that, in all the kind of complications of being a woman around a bunch of men, that's absolutely real. But when you are around, but I don't think that's an industry problem. I just think that's being a human problem. It doesn't necessarily matter which industry you're in. I think that's always going to be a thing. But when I am around, all the people we work with, I am respected just like everybody else. And so that's how I want to be treated. That's how I try to treat others. And I think when you're around good people, it's really, not that bad of a problem. And it is nice to have men around because there are definitely things that are harder for me to pick up than it is for larger guys.
They're good for something.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it's still unfortunately an issue, but I really think it's getting better. And I don't think it's a main issue though in my life, thankfully, at least.
Well, I did want to ask you, is there anything special that you're working on for 2021? Some vision that you have in mind for the wines for this year? Or...
Let's see. Well, we've already, every year, several times a year, we go through and try all the wines and everything. And usually during the beginning, we make all of our decisions on how we're going to push forward with things. So we actually already, let's see, how do I say this? We have a bunch of experimental stuff going. So we bought my property that my great grandfather had from my cousins because they ended up with it. And it's this really cool site in downtown Calpella. And I think the Native Americans used to live on it because we've been finding all these really cool artifacts, and it's like a really cool kind of plateau by the river. And it's got this white Pinole clay loam. And so we have a bunch of 60-plus-year-old Carignan vines out there, which are just the coolest. And then we planted a bunch of varieties that are important for us, but we also planted a bunch of red varieties that are new. So we planted, or at least new for us, Nero d'Avola, Sagrantino. We planted a couple different clones of Nebbiolo, which we've worked with forever, but having our own, this is new. A new planting of Ionico, Montepulciano. So we just got our very first crop of those. So I've been watching those really closely, and that's really exciting. It's like I have a barrel of each, and I'm like, oh, yay. So that's been like the fun new thing of this year, is kind of seeing slowly but surely what kind of wines those are going to turn out of that site.
So tell me a little bit about the current Calpella wines that you guys are producing. Just give me a little bit of tasting notes, basically, on the ones that you have.
Of course. Are you talking about the Calpella brand?
Yes, the Calpella brand.
So we really wanted to honor that area because Calpella has always been a really special place for my family and for a lot of other Italian Americans. And so this was a nice way for us to kind of focus some energy like to that area, and without calling it Calpella, because you can't call it after a township, of course. But they're supposed to be just really nice, solid, fruity, respectable wines that are also very like understandable. They're not these crazy esoteric wines. Are just like nice, beautiful, like the Zin is just a big mouthful, but nice and round tannin, super smooth, nice and juicy and forward. Same with the Pinot Noir. The Pinot Noir is super just berries to the face, and it's all barrel fermented, and so it's a little less Burgundian in style than what our Pinot Noir usually is. Um, and then we're about to release a Calpella Moscato, which is always fun. Everyone likes Moscato, and it's this nice, bright floral Moscato that's got a decent amount of acid behind the sugar. It is sweet. And then we're doing a Carignan Rosé out of the 60-year-old Carignan vines. So that's really cool too. So that's about to go into bottle in a week from now. So that's really exciting.
I can't wait to taste that one.
It's really good. So it's just we're doing things that we've always done. It's just more kind of focused on the Calpella area and making wines that are like not complicated, but just really good, solid expressions of those varieties while being fruit, kind of that California fruit forward, nice and juicy and ripe, and yeah.
So the last question I have for you is, do you have a favorite wine that you produce?
I get asked that question all the time from my friends, and this is the answer I always give everyone. What time of day is it? What am I doing? What am I eating? And what's the weather like? um, but the Ionico of ours has always been one of my favorites because the vineyard is just so wild, and my dad and I are pretty much the only ones that tend it because it's about 5 feet tall, and the cordons are about 18 inches off the ground. So I'm like sitting on a bucket trying to work in this crazy vineyard with a soil bed of also 18 inches. This whole thing is just kind of, I don't know, it makes me think of the wines from Santorini. It's like, oh, I'm just going to try to grow grapes in one of the hardest places possible. So I've always loved that wine. And I'm really liking our Vesuvius blend right now that has some of the weird kind of unknown white grape varieties from like mostly the companion or from the grape varieties where Mount Vesuvius is around. So that one is just, it's got this crazy stone fruit, white floral kind of jasmine and tuberose, and it's this beautiful rich mouth, and it almost seems sweet, but it's totally dry. It's just got this beautiful, I don't know, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around everything that's going on in it. It's just a really fun wine, and it's great with cheese and seafood, and versatility is amazing too.
Okay. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you would like to say about the winery to let everyone know about?
If you're tired of the same old stuff all of the time, if you're kind of, I mean, we do make Pinots, but if you're tired of Pinot and Cab and whatnot, like we do make great versions of those wines and they're super good. But if you're looking for all the weird stuff, all the things you don't see, we're that place. Like those are our favorites. That's kind of where our heart and soul is. Like, hey, you want to come have some Negro Amaro? Come over here. So.
Okay. Well, Alexandria, thank you so much for being with us today and doing this interview. And we will talk to you hopefully again soon.
Exactly. Thank you so much for having me. It was really nice to finally meet you over Zoom.
Absolutely.